Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps Unbound webinar, brought to you by TechStrong and Tricentis. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of TechStrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead, but first I have a few housekeeping notes to touch on. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion or you'd like to share it with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude the webinar today. If you have any question for our panel members today, we want you to go ahead and put those into the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of the screen. And if you have any further comments for our panelists, or you just like to let us know from where you're tuning in, we want you to use the chat tab for that. Finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will have a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So stick around to see if you're one of our 4 lucky winners. On to our topic today, we'll be discussing DevOps Unbound, strategies for performance testing in the cloud. And my expert panel today consists of Mitch Ashley, Principal of TechStrong Research, Alan Schimmel, CEO of TechStrong Group, Henrik Rexed, Cloud Native Advocate for Dynatrace, Brian Cole, Director of Customer Engineering for Tricentis, and Charity Majors, CTO of Honeycomb. And it is my pleasure at this point in time to let our panel have the floor. Thank you all so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Cody. Hey, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel, CEO at TechStrong Group, and thanks very much to Cody for the introductions. I'm going to give each of our panel members a chance to introduce themselves further in just a moment. But I wanted to go over a couple of house cleaning or groundkeeping rules here, because this isn't your regular webinar, right? This is DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly video series that we do here on TechStrong TV. And then once a month or once every 6 weeks on TechStrong Learning, we do a live version of it. So this is our sort of normal DevOps Unbound, except we have some very special guests in addition to our panel members, and that's you, our audience. And how good or interesting this panel and this roundtable are will be directly related to how active you, our audience, are. You guys drive a lot of the conversation. You guys drive a lot of the activity. Cody mentioned that we have a public chat section, and feel free to use that. People already are. We're just getting participant names and not their real names or what have you. But if you're going to say hello from where you're from. We got someone from London. I saw someone else from New York. But, you know, if you're going to, I always get a kick out of seeing where in the world people are on these things. And you can feel free to chat in that public chat. Of course, whatever you put in there, everyone sees, everyone can answer, including our council member, our panel members, or other attendees. There is another section of your chat bar on the right-hand side, and that's under Q&A. And if you put something in the Q&A, just our panel members will see that, and we will try to bring it up to the whole panel. And you know, it doesn't just necessarily have to be questions. If you have comments, thoughts, your own opinion, this is an interactive session. Let's be interactive. With that being said, now though, let me introduce our panel. Cody had introduced her last, but I always like to introduce her first. I'm really happy to be back on board here with Charity Majors, who's the co-founder CTO at Honeycomb. And Charity will tell you a little bit about Honeycomb and herself. Hey, Charity, why don't you give them a little background?
Hi. Yeah, I feel like the odd duck out in this panel because I don't have a history of like 2 decades of performance engineering. Although I've done a bit of database performance engineering. I'm currently the co-founder and CTO at Honeycomb, where we do observability for complex and distributed systems. A lot of people are stealing our marketing language, but nobody actually does what we do. So you should try it out. We have a very generous free tier.
Absolutely. And Charity, you're never an odd duck out of a good technical discussion. I know you well enough.
No, that's true. I have opinions for everyone. Plenty to go around.
Absolutely, and I'm counting on you. And quite frankly, you have a lot more performance testing experience than I do. So,
okay, I'll take it.
Right? So yeah, you're good. No feelings of inadequacy here. Let's next go to Henrico coming to us. Henrique is based in the south of France. Henrique, welcome to DevOps Unbound. A little background on yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Henrik Rexel, like you mentioned, and I've been working 15 years, a bit more than 15 years, in fact, in the performance industry. So I've been almost a colleague of the other council member here, Brian Cole. So I was working from Neotis, and now since almost 1 year, I'm working for Dynatrace, the observability platform, similar to Honeycomb. So we do both provide observability for corporate enterprises. And here I'm very excited to talk about performance testing and how we could also validate anything related to the cloud native space.
Good, and thank you, Henry. Last of our panel members is Brian Cole. I should mention, for those of you who may have signed up in days or weeks in advance, Brian was a not last minute, but recent addition to our panel, stepping in. So Brian, special big thank you for stepping in. And if you wouldn't mind giving the audience a little background.
Yep. So my name is Brian Cole. I am the Director of Customer Engineering here at Tricentis. And I have spent the last 24 years dealing with performance testing tools and software solutions, primarily at software vendors. So a lot of proof of concepts, a lot of helping people realize the value and giving strategy and guidance advice.
Excellent. And the last member of our panel, but certainly not the least, is my co-host on DevOps Unbound, longtime business partner, Mitchell Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, introduce yourself.
Hey, Alan, always good to be here co-hosting with you, and I love our panel. By the way, we may not have baseball. We don't know if we're going to have it, but Brian is our pinch hitter. So thank you, Brian, for doing that for us. I'm Mitch Ashley. I am principal with our research organization, TechStrong Research, and also CTO with Alan for TechStrong Group. So great to be here with everybody. Thank you for coming here. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, just for anyone who may have just recently joined in, thanks for joining in. People from Togo and India. If you have questions, comments, put it in chat, put it in the Q&A if you want the panel to comment on it, and we're going to get started. So when we talk about performance testing in the cloud, right? Two of you have been doing it extensively for more than 10 years. To me, there's two aspects of performance testing in the cloud. One is, look, when I used to hear performance testing as an executive at a company Mitchell and I worked on together, when Mitchell would come in and say, well, the engineering team has to do performance test. We're done with coding. We got to do some performance testing. My hair was on fire. I had hair back then. My hair was on fire because, man, that just seemed to me like cha-ching. I'm writing big checks. Performance testing was hard. It was expensive to scale it out to, because back then you didn't even have the virtual ability.
Well, that's why you don't wait until you're done writing code to do performance testing, because you
exactly
that.
Yep.
That's what it was. Thanks, Alan, for sharing my dirty laundry.
I saw the light. But that's what it was back then. It was like, oh God, we just spent 2-3 months coding, and now we have a release due out in a month and a half or two. And we got to do all this testing, performance testing. We don't have enough phones. We don't have enough browsers. We don't have enough anything to really kind of test it. And, the idea of having the cloud, well, wasn't the cloud supposed to obliviate all that? Right? Wasn't it? Now I had burstability and elasticity and all of these things. Should I still have bottlenecks? The flip side, though, is, look, I've got applications that run in the cloud, right? So even, where are my performance bottlenecks anyway? So, the bottom line is the cloud's had a profound effect on performance testing, as has DevOps and shift left and all these things. Charity, you spoke up, so I'd like, I'm going to throw it over to you. What do you think?
I think that performance testing is just another kind of testing, and it's not something you can save till the end. It's something you need to be doing all along. I also think that, my big bugbear is testing in production, because, you can do as many synthetic tests as you want. you're still not going to learn fuck all until you actually put it in front of real users. So like, I think that the real, frontier of testing is feature flags and, progressive deployments and anything that gets it in front of real users, even if they're like a small segment of users, as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, so that you can start finding the real, unknown unknowns in your code.
Okay, Brian, Henrique, is that anathema to you, or you agree?
So I would say that first of all, I just want to remind that performance testing, it's a big name that includes lots of various type of tests. So saying testing in production, I would say yes, but for a specific type of performance test activities. If you apply heavy load, when you design your tests, you design them in front of specific objectives that will cover specific situations or risks that you have identified. So if you want to, I don't know, just break it, just destroy things, I would never do it in production. Or you could do it in production if you're immature enough by unplugging your database, because you want to do read and writes in your database. So if you start writing a lot of assets in your production environment, then it could be also, for the business perspective, a lot of disaster, because you will include a lot of data that doesn't make sense for your business analytics, for example. But yes, you can do it in production, but it requires a lot of maturity, especially from the load perspective. If you do just synthetic tests, yes, obviously it's a way of getting signals to see how it responds. But for me, testing the performance and how many concurrency your services are able to handle, that needs to be taken as early as possible, like mentioned before. So every time you have a new service, you can start doing very simple, basic tests that will identify the limits of that particular services. And then when you move in your project lifecycle, then you can complexify a bit your tests by including more aspects, because you're connecting more services together. But I think for me, don't improvise in production. That will be my biggest share for the audience. Performance is crucial. I mean, look around you. If you open your browser and you go to your social networks, your preferred social networks, and you suddenly it doesn't respond, you said, what happens here? It doesn't respond in half a second. So people are expecting performance from you. So don't do load without knowing what you're doing in your production environment.
Yep, and even
slow is the new down, right?
Exactly so. After about 4 seconds, you lose about a third of all of your audience. After about 5 seconds, you've lost about half. So if you're, Alan, you talked about that big paycheck towards the end. There's a huge cost to having a slow performing application. If you're going to, especially on things like an e-commerce site, potentially the cost there is dramatically higher than whatever you're going to spend on performance testing. And I've been where you were as well, in those early days of development went for about 8 months, and now it ran a little bit long. So we had 6-week QA cycle, and that ran a little bit long. So we've got 2 weeks to performance test. And I was that guy asking the question, what happens if we find a problem? Because performance isn't a feature to be bolted on. It is an inherent characteristic and attribute of that application. And if you pile a bunch of features on top of a poor architecture that won't scale properly, you might need to undo a lot of work in order to remediate that problem. It's potentially very costly, which plays to Henrik's point of do this continuously. That is the continuous performance testing message of embedding it intentionally into your CI/CD pipelines, constantly stressing, starting from the individual components and services that your developers are creating well before there's a web page. Test those, and then begin testing the individual web pages, then test the application, and do all of this very intentionally. And then when you put it into production, I'm a huge advocate for feature-based development and flagging users. Using Amazon.com as an example, I'm a great candidate for them to turn stuff on. I'm an Amazon Prime member. I don't shop terribly often. I'm not running a huge amount of transactions, but I'm probably loyal enough that I will put up with a feature failure or some sort of system error. I'm the target audience for this feature deployment into production for that subset of users to make sure everything's working while the system's under that traditional user load.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I didn't realize that I was so ahead of the curve. I've been accused of testing my code in production since almost I started my career. So
that might be a different problem we want to talk about, maybe.
Yeah, if it worked in production, it would have worked in test, right? No. So certainly things have progressed a long, long way. I totally agree with, we're talking about the impact of performance and how that affects the user's experience, the business, all of the above, and the incremental progressive kind of approaches that Charity, that you mentioned. It seems like it's a combination of how we architect and configure our environment and software and how we test things, and also how we use resources differently, right? Because we're not only testing for one environment, we may be testing for multiple environments, a current, a future, maybe going back and figuring out, recreating something. So we've got a lot more flexibility, but there's also complexity that goes with it too. So I think it's, the linear approach we were all talking about, nothing is linear anymore. So we just kind of throw that out and think about how we test these different variables and feature flags and all of that.
I think
capture.
Go ahead, Charity.
Capture replay is like the gold standard of tests, right? Like, I've written this piece of software for 3 different databases now, where you capture all the traffic for 24 hours. You take a snapshot of the database at the start, and then you replay it again and again. You tweak the variables, right? And that's where you can just slam the disks, right? Tweak the read IO versus the write IO, and it's super fun. But it's not as, that's probably the best way to flesh out the known unknowns. You're never going to really address the Michael Jackson problem, which is like the problem when Michael Jackson died and he was only going to die once, and it took down Google because nobody was prepared for that, And I think that, like, those are your unknown unknowns, right? And like, another really interesting idea that Netflix does, and people who have reached some level of maturity, like the level of maturity where you have enough instrumentation, you have enough reliability that you're like looking at second order problems, is just to run like 10 or 20% of your traffic as test traffic all the time, because then you always know that you have overhead that you can turn it down, right? If there's an unexpected spike in traffic, just run it all the time. And of course, then you need to make sure that the traffic that you're sending synthetically is like distributed evenly across all of the shards or partitions or whatever. But I think it's a fun trick.
Yep. So let me this early part of our roundtable here, we really kind of focused in on testing, shift left testing pre-performance versus testing performance, and look, strategy number 1, they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both, right? Strategy number 2, and it's something Brian hit on, I hit on it, is that for too long, performance testing was kind of the last kid in the bed, and the little one said roll over, and that's the one that gets knocked out of the bed, right? Because first we did the code, then we had to do all these other testings, and we almost started doing performance testing in production, not as a strategy that was beneficial in the way to do it, but as a strategy of, crap, we don't have enough time to get it done before, and this thing has to go out the door tomorrow. And okay, we'll do the performance testing, on a live audience. It's the best way to learn anyway, right? But that's not really that's to Henrique's point, that's improvising. That's not strategy. That's right. If we're going to do performance testing in a live environment, we should be from the outset saying we're doing it in a live environment for all the reasons Charity's talking about, right? Not because, shoot, we ran out of time and this thing has to get out the door. And I think that's been one of the biggest differences. And maybe it's the DevOps and the continuous testing kind of mentality taking hold of saying, hey, we are going to do performance testing in a production environment. Doesn't mean we're not going to do performance testing pre-production, but we're going to do some in a production environment. And we're not going to improvise, to Henrique's point. This is what we want to do. I mean, think about, Brian, when was the first time you heard the term feature flags?
At least 6 years ago at this point, probably a little bit longer. And I can probably count on one hand the number of companies that I've interacted with who are using feature flag deployment into production today.
Really?
It's very rare.
Wow.
Really? Now, yet I know, from our TechStrong TV interviews, I interview quite a few companies that are very involved in feature flags, and and some of them are kind of feature flag as a service, if you will, and the numbers are in the billions, right? Henrique, I'm wondering, I don't know, how much are you seeing sort of feature flags and let's call it post-production performance testing like that happening?
So I think it really depends on first of all the maturity of the company and which business areas they're working on. Obviously, when it comes to e-commerce, most of the retailers are quite aware and on that approach of utilizing feature flags. For other business that are more critical, like financials, banking, or stuff like this, most of the banks want to utilize feature flags for at least for the one that I know. Same thing for insurance company. So I think it really depends of how agile or how fragile I can name it I am and how mature I am to implement this. And once I have that, then I can take advantage of this. And then I think the DevOps movement has pushed companies on that direction. And I think the notion of blue-green deployment is it's not a feature flag, but at least it helps you to test with a small population your release and validate that and secure it before deploying to all your users. So feature flags or blue-green deployments, I mean, it's up to you. But the idea is that you have to measure if what all the news this release is adding to your business or to your users before pushing it to the 100% population of your client or customers, I would say. And also, I would just want to bring one topic up. So we were mentioning performance testing on the cloud. There are obviously things related to the cloud itself because we rely, like Brian mentioned at the early beginning of this of today's event, that cloud, yes, you can scale, that's great, but it has a consequence. The notion of scale, the notion of power, you pay it. So 20 years ago, we were measuring how fast is my service responding. Now we can say how expensive is my service running. Because if I have a service that requires one node or a couple of pods to run, and then the next release, it requires 10 times more, then potentially I've increased the costs of managing this application in my production environment with 10 times more, just because my service requires more power to serve my users. So that's also an angle. So there's a lot of KPI, I think, behind the notion of performance, especially in the cloud, that we did not have 20 years ago when we were just testing basic on-premise sort of applications, I would say.
Okay. Charity, I was going to say something and something from the audience, but before I do, I thought you sounded like you wanted to say something, or no?
No, just listening.
Okay. So, it's funny, Brian, I also didn't know the term feature flags till probably 5 years ago, but I knew blue-green. It's something, and I'm far from a developer, Mitchell, much more than I. So I've known blue-green. One of our folks in the audience says, though, they've been working on an internet banking platform, but they've been using feature toggles, as he calls it, for going back 20 years. So I don't, though maybe the term feature flags is a new term. What's represented behind it, whether you want to call it blue-green, something else, I think is something that we've always, or at least for as long as I'm aware, was something that we've tried to put into, it may not have been called performance testing, but we did blue-green thing to see what are customers like, right? Do they like a square edge or a round edge on that button? Do they like it in this font or that font, right? I mean, these are the, that's how I always thought of it, at least. So I agree with the audience member who says it's been around. Guys, I want to focus for a little bit on pre-production testing, though, right? Is it still a pre-production performance testing? Is it still a thing with the cloud? If so,
absolutely. But there's some nuance to the conversation that needs to be probably talked about. So when we talk about an application in the cloud, there's two main types that we're discussing here. One is an application that you are putting into a public or private cloud. You're deploying the software, you're running those AWS or Azure servers. That's your application. Absolutely, you want to performance test that. Those are very different than software as a service applications. If you look at something like a Workday or a Salesforce or some other system that you are subscribed to, those contracts often include language saying you are not allowed to run performance tests in that system. Those are multi-tenant applications. Those underlying compute resources may be serving multiple customers. They don't want you running a load test to bring down that environment or degrade it, which may impact many of their customers. They're responsible for providing the service, and that should be written into the contract as well. So if you are looking at signing one of those contracts, look for the performance guarantees. They should be in there, and if they're not, add them. You have a expectation of getting the service that you're going to be paying for. But when we talk about cloud, it's this idea that I've heard many times of, I can just scale my infrastructure out. If the application begins to get slow, I can build an elastic application that will begin grabbing additional compute resources. It will provision additional machines, and I can scale laterally that way. That's a great way to have your costs kind of spiral out of control, and that you lose a lot of the benefit. Henrik?
Well, yeah. And it only works for stateless applications.
It
if
sure
you're
does.
and also, just to add, yes, you can scale, but adding an extra node, keep in mind that it could take between spinning up the node or spinning up the extra pod, getting the container, all the assets to make the application ready to take some traffic, it could take almost 4 or 5 minutes. And when you're in a spike situation, 4 or 5 minutes could be eternity. It could be just stressful. And you can wait for that extra resource to come in, but it's just too late. And then you have what we call the waterfall effect, where everything's falling down because the node is not able to take the traffic anymore. Then you stress the new node that just come in, and then you are waiting for another one, and then you're just struggling. So even with scale, elastic environments, there are obviously methodology behind the scene to validate how you want to scale up new nodes, because they are usually the policies based on thresholds, specific thresholds that you can determine on your cloud provider. And this needs to be tested to validate that the policy that you're going to use in the case of scaling up a new node is able to take the traffic in time. Because it's great to pay for an awesome Elastic service, but if the Elastic service that you have there is not helping you in peak hours, then it doesn't make sense.
It's interesting. There's an SRE angle to this too. It's not just, when we don't have enough performance, we add, more capabilities to meet the demand. There's also trying to break it, trying to find where the breakpoints are, what those things are that we can go back and address from an engineering or configuration infrastructure perspective. And performance testing also falls into the realm of the SREs, as well as test and app dev and that whole cycle. So performance testing, to Cherry's point about doing it early in the beginning, and as we talked about in production in various phases, it's also an ongoing life cycle element of this.
I think it's a mix of early performance engineering will be from a DevOps teams, and then closer to your production is going to be the SREs. But the SRE, when they do performance testing, they won't validate the same objective, the same risks, because you're fishing for reliability. So you're going to probably mix load performance and chaos engineering to validate critical situations. So to that point, I think there is a part of the traditional Big Bang load testing that we new few years back that are now in the hands of the SREs. And now the short, simple load test is in the hands of the teams, the DevOps teams, I would say.
Guys, we got a question or in the Q&A section from our audience. And question is around, what about the impact of things like blockchain, for instance, right? Blockchain is of course, a potential fly in the ointment, or maybe it's a friend and not a foe. I don't know. I mean, how does blockchain and that type of technology impact, let's say, performance testing? There's impact across a wider spectrum, I get, but specifically to testing here, performance testing.
I know blockchain has been, performance testing or performance of blockchains has been an issue, and there's various ways of designing and building them to be more efficient, more performing. But I think that was an early question. Maybe it still is relevant of, how fast, how much can we put on dependency on blockchain as part of our transaction flow and response time to customers versus asynchronous activities that could happen on the blockchain.
Okay. Anybody else, any thoughts on blockchain? Because I have another QA from the audience, if not.
So I think there is, depends on the nature of your blockchain network. Because again, blockchain is just a network. So the blockchain network, if it's a private one, then you own the network. Then if you know that you have one node that sits in Paris and the other one is in Sydney, and you want to make sure that the transactions are mined in the right time, then yes, you're going to test it. But then if you do public blockchain, it's like testing peer-to-peer. Do we really test peer-to-peer transactions? That's the questions, and it's more difficult, more expensive. So I think testing the private, so the Hyperledger networks, yes, you can definitely do it as a load testing, with load testing for sure.
Sure.
And from a technology perspective, I'm not certain that the performance testing solutions out there care very much, right? It's an API, you call those, it invokes the service. This is very much a telemetry and monitoring issue, trying to figure out, is it actually working properly behind the scenes?
Yep. So we've got another question here in the QA section. And this one to me is really, look, not everyone in our audience are performance testing or even testing experts. We get cyber people and DevOps people and cloud native people. And it really goes back to basics kind of thing. Does stress testing and load testing come under the umbrella of performance testing, or are there huge differences between the three of them?
So from
absolutely.
Yeah, there are differences between them. I would say that in all the hundreds of customers I've interacted with, the terms are often used interchangeably, synonymously, and wildly divergently from one another. And there isn't a set standard that's out there. If you're asking for my opinion, a load test is where you are attempting to put user traffic or load, you're simulating users on a system based on reality. They're going to go at the same rate as normal users. You're trying to load it up to what you've observed in your current systems as expected load in normal conditions. Performance testing might improve or increase those numbers as you're looking to kind of stress out and start to get towards the edges of that. Stress testing is really where you're trying to go vastly beyond that. So if we use many years ago, Intuit had a performance issue around tax season because they budgeted for multiple factors of additional load, but that was that turnover year where almost everybody started to e-file. And instead of getting 3 times the user traffic as they expected, they got 10 times the user traffic. So stress testing is designed to try and find those, but there are countless other terms that you'll bump into around endurance testing, negative testing, volume testing, which in support of Charity's argument, I particularly hate the term volume testing, which is you should run your test with large amounts of data. Yeah, you should all the time, never as an explicit type of test. That should be the norm. You need large volumes of data that are going to exist in the production environment. It's like imagining you're holding a water bottle and the goal is you unscrew the lid and all the water needs to come out. So you hold it upside down and you unscrew the lid. If you have a thimble full of water in there, comes out really fast and you go, great, our response time is half a second. And then you roll it into production and load up a full water bottle. It takes a lot longer for all that water to come out, and suddenly your expectations are now not in line with reality. I can't emphasize how important having a large volume of data while you're performance testing really is. You should absolutely be prioritizing that.
Fair enough. All right. So let me go to a new subject within and it's not from a question in the audience, it's my own kind of question. You know, part and parcel, an important part of the whole DevOps experience is the concept of feedback loops, right? And look, it's one of it goes to the heart of observability. If you observe a tree in the forest, but no one gets any feedback, did it really fall? Right? I mean, it's the same thing with testing. How do we make sure we have the proper feedback loops for our performance, right? In a world of continuous testing, pre, post, production, what are the feedback loops? You know, how do we make sure we've got those feedback loops implemented?
This is where I feel observability is so important. And I'll often say to people who are thinking of doing some sort of chaos engineering, like chaos engineering is something where like you really need to be this tall to ride this ride. And this tall is defined by having enough observability to tell what you're actually doing. Because, you know, I've seen people who have like done chaos experiments, and then a month or two later, they realize that there's some like refuse. there's some versions out there that are still old versions, or some stuff that they, you know, blocked using the network, and it's still out there in the wild because they didn't have enough information to clean it up afterwards. Right. And by observability, I think you need the ability to drill down to the raw rows, to the raw events, to see, like, you know, this is why you need high cardinality, this is why you need high dimensionality, to be able to ask the questions like, after I made this change, what changes happened and where, so that you can see, oh, this node is still issuing, you know, above average number of errors, or oh, this shard is still, you know, returning these weird things, or oh, you know, this instance is still, you know, running this old version or something. If you don't have the ability to ask these really fine-grained questions to see what you actually did, then you don't have a feedback loop.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Yep. Henrik, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I would say that first, I think DevOps and SRE relies on observability in general. So if you want to be successful in your DevOps, in the way you deploy your application through your DevOps methodology and how you manage your environment in your production, you need obviously observability. So by observability, I mean when you're testing, especially when you do continuous testing, you don't want to spend 3 hours to run a test and then suddenly say, oh, I don't know what happened, so let's rerun the test. I'm pretty sure that if you say that to your manager and say, I don't get it, why are we losing 6 hours just because you just forgot to pick up those metrics? So yes, observability is required. So you need to, first of all, measure how your environment works technically, how of course the user is what is the experience from a user perspective, and also if there is a problem in the code, if you have the ability to drill down to the code with traces, then you will save a significant amount of time. Yeah. So that's from the pure pre-prod dev staging environment approach. But then when you go to production, you have deployed something, you want to make sure that between release 1 and release 2, you're always up to speed, that you're always good. So I think with observability, it's natural, you need it. And I think to be able to automatically validate and be smart in your automation in the continuous testing approach, you need to implement what we call SLI and SLO in the SRE practice that will help you to validate your test results from at least at the early stage. But then the advantage is that you took the time to define your SLI, to define those SLO, and then you can use those SLI and SLO in your production environment. So then you keep track on always the same objectives from a pure dev perspective, staging, whatever, and to the production environment as well.
And it plays into that conversation about continuous assessment, essentially the propagation of information from one team to another. And very often we don't see a lot of operations involvement in the pre-production space. The DevOps term seems to be mostly unidirectional. It's dev, and ops. And that really should change. There's a huge amount of value that an operations team can contribute and provide in any performance testing activity, most notably for their own comfort with what's coming down the line and it's about to be running in their production environment, that they would surely they would like to know what this thing is going to behave like. This provides a great way for them to begin to gain that insight and access to, here are the metrics, here are the performance characteristics, here's how it was performance tested, and hey, that matches our experience in production, or it doesn't, and maybe we should provide some feedback on how their tests are being structured and created. There's a lot of value in involving the performance team. And without monitoring, it's of limited use to know that there's a problem. I would say a good analogy is looking and seeing smoke over the hill. You know there's probably a fire, as opposed to knowing which house it's at, as opposed to knowing that it's in the kitchen, in the oven, because of the following reasons. Their observability provides tight guidance and targeted response mechanisms and leads to the practice of performance engineering, not performance testing, which is run the test, get some results, and then provide actionable feedback on what should change in order to improve performance. That's the goal that everybody wants to get to.
I have another analogy like Brian. I used to compare performance testing without observability or monitoring. At that time it was monitoring, but it's exactly like listening to a horror movie at the radio. So you hear people screaming in the radio, but you have no clue who is been killed. So we are in 2022. So just purchase a 4K screen, and then you will see the actors being killed on lively. So that's observability.
I find it interesting that all of our analogies are so dark. I'm talking about house fires. You're talking about horror movies.
I think it's a really good point. You know, Alan, I thought it might be interesting to explore how can observability, having much more insights into the sort of internals instead of thinking of performance testing as an external factors, I/O and throughput and all the normal things.
Yeah. And being able to drill down is really the key thing. Like we're so used to, our monitoring or observability or ops metrics being so low level that you kind of need a translation layer to translate it back into the language of like endpoints and APIs and stuff. And that's something that I think is changing and can't change fast enough, right? Like you shouldn't need a wizard to interpret to you like, oh, this change you made in your code resulted in, these, because there's like 4 different kinds of memory usage in Linux and like all these things under /pack. You shouldn't actually need to have it translated for you. You shouldn't need to have to be an expert in it. You should be able to trace it back to, oh, I made this change in my code. So, this endpoint, the errors or the latency is rising or whatever. I think that's super key.
Yeah, sometimes it's not as the fields of the view are not as clean as that, though, right?
Very much so, yeah. And that plays into that DevOps message, right? Of I want to have that pipeline of changes. The developers write some code, they check it in. A series of automated steps begins at that point. What we want is to have the ability to link back. This performance test was executed because this source code was plugged into the CI system and built and deployed and then tested. And that source code change made things worse or better, and be able to correlate that properly. It's very challenging to do because software is very weird. You touch component A and suddenly component R is much slower.
Yeah.
Okay, when nobody knows why exactly, but you start to find these very bizarre relationships between different components.
But sometimes I see this like in talking to people in the feature flag space, right? You start running multiple feature flags in releases, and you're seeing results. And can you isolate? Can you isolate? Well, this is a result of that. But this other feature flag that we had set to this didn't have any impact. Let's call it feature flag A, didn't have any impact on feature flag B because they were just 2 different things anyway. and it can get cloudy quickly. No pun intended.
Oh,
it
yeah.
can get cloudy
it's
quickly,
rare.
right?
It's very rare that you can draw a straight line from one to the other. When it happens, it's fantastic, but like it's the odd out.
It's just moments when that just goes right. Hey guys, I hate to do this, but we're 45 minutes in. We usually try to keep these sessions to about 45 minutes, but I wanted to ask Cody if he's here, because I know we have Amazon gift cards to give out, right? And Cody, if you're there,
sure do.
You want to announce some winners, or did I get you off guard?
No, we're totally ready. So our 4 winners for today's $25 Amazon gift cards are Venkata E, Timothy Q, Sandra S, and Frank J.
Excellent. Guys, before I give each of you a chance to say goodbye to the audience, I want to first of all shout out to our good friends at Tricentis. They sponsor DevOps Unbound. We're not always live like this, as I mentioned. 3 out of 4 are always just pre-recorded. You can catch them on TechStrong TV, or you can watch recorded versions on digitalanarchist.com. And there's some good ones up there. Check it out. We do have next month, I don't know if it's a month or the next live roundtable topic open, and that'll be on March 15th. So it's actually just a couple weeks out. And it's Can Automation and AI ML solve our DevOps hiring problems? And I don't know if anything can solve our DevOps hiring problems, but we'll try to tackle that one. Sign up for that. It should be a great one. Charity, I see you're showing up. You always show up, Charity. But anyway, with that, I was just looking in the chat section. All right. Let me give each of you a chance to say goodbye to the audience. So we'll start off with Henrique, if it's okay.
So first of all, thank you for everyone to listen to this great discussion. It's too bad that it's only 45 minutes, because we can probably stay for 3 more hours discussing about that topic. Anyway, if you're looking new to performance, I would recommend two channels in YouTube. First is Perf Bites. So it's a well-known podcast that is turned into YouTube. So check it out. There is a lot of tips around performance. And the second one is my YouTube channel about Is It Observable? So if you're looking for any tutorials related to observability in general with open observability frameworks, check it out. I cover a lot of open source frameworks. So if you're looking for observability, check that channel.
Excellent. And we'll check those out. Charity, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Missy Tipsy. You can find Honeycomb at honeycomb.io. We do a lot of blog posts about open telemetry and observability and instrumentation in general. This has been super fun. I would happily sign up for a 3-hour webinar to talk with y'all about like MySQL load testing and MongoDB load testing. That'd be a ball. I don't know if anyone would like to watch it, but I would have fun.
Well, audience, you could vote. Brian, how about you?
Everybody's like, no to 3-hour talking about performance testing.
The thing I learned, one of the things I love about being in our tech space, in the place where we play, is no matter how weird or different you think you are, you're not in this, right? Because there are people who are into it. So I love that about being in tech, is there are people who really do want to talk about this stuff for 3 hours. And that's our audience, right? Those are the people we're trying to reach. It's maybe a little weird, but that's the facts. Brian, how about you?
So thank you everybody for attending today. If you do have an interest in beginning your own performance testing journey, or you're interested in a very modern take on performance testing, I would encourage you to look up the Tricentis website and see what we have to offer.
Excellent. And again, thanks to Tricentis. Mitchell, why don't you take it home?
All great companies that folks on the panel are representing, and thank you again to Tricentis for sponsoring. I think one of the things I take away from our conversation is, yes, performance testing, performance can be designed in as part of, our application architecture and DevOps processes, but it really is a holistic thing. It's part of the life of, because, nothing happens till you put it in production. That's when you really find out.
True.
And now we think about, label your performance testing SRE. Maybe you'll get more funding for it or do something like that. But I think we have an opportunity to really make this part of the ongoing life of software because things change too
What's
fast.
more fun than performance testing? It's where you find all the things that blow your mind. Like, oh my God, I had no idea my code was doing this. Like, what's more fun than that?
Let's break it, right?
Let's break it.
Exactly that.
Freddie and I are going to do the 3 hours.
And then hand it over to somebody else to fix. It's great.
Well, but
Yes.
that used to represent 60% of the people in what we used to call the InfoSec industry. Why did you get into InfoSec? It wasn't for the money. It was because I like to break things. All right. And that was my best friends in security. That was what they were all about. Anyway, hey, Henrique, there's a question for you in the presenters chat. If you can answer that for charity. But guys, Mitchell, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Charity. Thank you for watching this. It's been a blast. Do check out DevOps Unbound on TechStrong TV. We'll see you all March 15th for a live roundtable. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong and DevOps Unbound. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.